The invitation sat on my kitchen counter for weeks, taunting me. Our 15-year anniversary dinner at the Royal Oak, the restaurant where Drew had proposed. I traced my fingers over the embossed lettering, remembering how excited I'd been when I'd sent these out to our closest friends and family. That was before I found the text messages, before I discovered the receipts for jewelry I'd never received, before the late nights at the office started adding up to something I couldn't ignore. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should have canceled the whole thing, but something inside me refused to give him the satisfaction. 15 years of marriage deserved a proper ending. I just didn't realize how proper it would be. I arrived at the Royal Oak 30 minutes early, my black cocktail dress fitting better than it had in years. Revenge body, Mel had called it when she zipped me up earlier that evening. I'd spent the last 3 months in the gym after finding Drew's messages to Vanessa. It wasn't about looking good for him. It was about reclaiming myself. The hostess led me to our private dining room overlooking the river. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, refracting tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. 15 arrangements of white roses and blue hydrangeas, my favorites, lined the center of the table. I'd ordered them myself. Drew would have forgotten. "Mrs. Mitchell," the manager greeted me with a warm smile. "Everything is prepared according to your specifications. The champagne is chilling, and the first course will be served once all your guests have arrived." I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Thank you, Edward. It's perfect." I moved to the window, watching the sunset paint the river in shades of gold and crimson. Behind me, the door opened. "You look stunning," Sam Cohen said, placing his briefcase on a chair near the door. My lawyer wasn't supposed to be part of tonight's celebration, but plans change. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? We could still handle it privately." I turned from the window, straightening my shoulders. "Some things deserve an audience, Sam." I smiled, picking up my clutch and retrieving the envelope inside. "Do you have the documents?" He patted his briefcase. "Everything we discussed." The door opened again, and Mel rushed in, breathless and beautiful in her emerald dress. "I parked next to Drew's car," she said, eyes wide. "Jen, he's not alone." I took a deep breath. "I know." Mel blinked. "You know, how could you possibly—" "Because I've known about Vanessa for months," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I'm pretty sure I know exactly what he's planning tonight." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Care to share with the class?" I smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Drew thinks he's going to make a grand gesture tonight. He's going to announce that he's leaving me, that Vanessa is pregnant, and that they're starting a new life together." I smoothed my dress. "He's expecting tears, drama, maybe even some begging. He's expecting to look like the reasonable one when I fall apart." "That bastard," Mel whispered. "He's about to learn a valuable lesson about expectations," I replied, checking my watch. "Our guests will be arriving any minute. Sam, you know what to do." Sam nodded and stepped into the attached anteroom just as the first guests began to filter in. Drew's business partner Kevin and his wife, my cousin Eliza and her husband, Drew's parents, who had always treated me like a daughter. Each greeting felt like an act in a play where only I knew the final scene. Drew arrived last, as always, and he wasn't alone. Vanessa Collins clung to his arm, her red dress stretched over her slightly rounded belly, her blonde hair cascading over bare shoulders. She was beautiful in that obvious way that men like Drew considered an achievement. His eyes widened when he saw me, clearly not expecting me to look so composed, so elegant. "Jennifer," he faltered, glancing around at our assembled friends and family. "I thought we were meeting earlier to discuss something." I tilted my head. "Did you? Must have slipped my mind." I looked pointedly at Vanessa. "I don't believe we've officially met, though I've heard so much about you." Vanessa's smile was uncertain, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "Nice to meet you too," she murmured. The room had fallen deadly silent. Drew's mother let out a small gasp, while his father's face hardened into a mask of disapproval. "Drew," his mother started, "what's going on?" Drew cleared his throat, his confidence returning as he slipped into performance mode. The charming, reasonable husband I'd watched fool everyone for years. "Since everyone is here," he announced, his hand finding Vanessa's waist, "I might as well say what I came to say." He looked at me with manufactured compassion. "Jennifer, you and I both know our marriage has been struggling for years." I sipped my water, watching him over the rim of my glass. Let him dig the hole deeper. "Vanessa and I," he continued, "we didn't plan for this to happen, but sometimes life gives you unexpected gifts." He placed his hand on her stomach. "We're expecting a baby boy in 4 months. His mother gasped again, louder this time. Kevin looked away, embarrassed. I could feel the pity directed at me from around the room. The awkward glances, the silent communication between couples. "I wanted to tell you privately," Drew said to me, his voice dripping with fake concern. "But you haven't been taking my calls. I thought tonight, with our friends here for support, would be better than dragging this out further." I set my glass down carefully. "Are you finished?" Drew blinked, clearly thrown by my calm demeanor. "Jennifer, I know this is difficult." "I asked if you were finished," I repeated, my voice level. He nodded, brow furrowed in confusion. This wasn't following his script. I smiled, standing to address our guests. "Thank you all for coming tonight. As you can see, this isn't exactly the anniversary celebration I had planned." A low chuckle rippled through the room, breaking some of the tension. But since Drew has been so honest with all of us, I think it's only fair that I share something too. I nodded toward the anteroom, and Sam stepped out, briefcase in hand. Drew's eyes narrowed. "Why is your lawyer here?" "Our lawyer, Drew. Sam has been our family attorney for 7 years. Don't you remember?" I opened my clutch and removed the envelope. "Before I share this with everyone, I want to ask you a question, and I'd like an honest answer for once." Drew shifted uncomfortably. "This isn't the time or place. Do you remember what you said when I asked you to sign the prenuptial agreement before our wedding?" I pressed on. "You told me, and I quote, 'I'm not marrying you for your family's money, Jen. I don't need a piece of paper to prove it.'" Drew's face had gone pale. Vanessa looked between us, confusion etched across her features. "What, Drew?" "Failed to mention," I continued, addressing our guests, "is that while he refused to sign my prenup, he had his own drawn up. One that I signed, believing it was the standard agreement my parents had requested." Sam stepped forward, placing his briefcase on the table and removing a document. "Mrs. Mitchell discovered the discrepancy 3 months ago when she consulted me about a possible divorce. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." I could see the exact moment when Drew realized that his plan was falling apart. His eyes darted from me to Sam, to the document, and back to me. "The prenuptial agreement that Mrs. Mitchell signed," Sam explained to the silent room, "contained several unusual clauses that Mr. Mitchell added without her knowledge. Most notably, a fidelity clause." Drew took a step forward. "That's enough, Jennifer. We can discuss this privately." "No," I said firmly. "You brought your pregnant girlfriend to our anniversary dinner in front of our friends and family. You don't get to decide what's private anymore." I turned back to our guests. "The fidelity clause that Drew insisted on states that if either party is unfaithful, they forfeit all rights to shared assets acquired during the marriage." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Drew's construction company, the one he built, using my family's investment as seed money, qualifies as a shared asset. Drew's face had gone from pale to crimson. "You can't do this." "I'm not doing anything, Drew. You did this." I turned to Vanessa, whose hand had fallen from her stomach. "How far along did you say you were? 4 months?" She nodded, eyes wide. "Interesting," I said, considering Drew and I were still sharing a bed 6 months ago. His mother let out a soft, "Oh, Drew," while his father's expression had morphed from disapproval to outright anger. "The timing makes the math quite simple," I continued, "which means the fidelity clause that Drew created to protect himself from me has now done exactly the opposite." I nodded to Sam, who passed the document to Drew's father, a retired judge who understood legal jargon better than most in the room. "You tricked me," Drew sputtered, his charm evaporating. "You must have known about this for months. You set me up." I laughed then, the sound surprising even me with its lightness. "Set you up? By what, Drew? By believing you were working late when you were with her? By trusting you when you said you wanted to save our marriage? By attending counseling? Alone because you were always too busy?" I shook my head. "I didn't set you up. I just finally started paying attention." Vanessa had moved away from Drew, her eyes darting between us. "What does this mean?" she asked, her voice small. "It means," Sam answered, "that according to the terms Mr. Mitchell himself created, he has forfeited his ownership stake in Mitchell Construction, along with their shared properties and investments." Drew lunged toward Sam. "You son of a—" Kevin stepped between them. "That's enough, Drew. You're embarrassing yourself." "Me?" Drew shouted. "She's the one turning our anniversary into a circus." "No," I corrected him. "You did that when you brought your pregnant girlfriend." The room fell silent again. Drew's father had finished reading the document and looked up, his expression grim. "It's airtight," he said, handing the papers back to Sam. "Drew, what were you thinking?" Drew's mother was crying quietly, while Vanessa had backed herself against the wall, one protective hand on her belly. I took a deep breath, suddenly tired of all of it. "I didn't do this for revenge, Drew. I did it because you left me no choice. You were planning to leave me with nothing while you started over with her." I gestured to Vanessa. "Did you tell her about the beach house in Malibu? Or the apartment in New York? Did you mention that you've been quietly moving assets into offshore accounts for the past year?" Drew's face confirmed what I already knew. Vanessa's expression of shock told me everything else. "You didn't just betray me," I said quietly. "You betrayed everyone who believed in you. Your parents who co-signed your first business loan. Kevin, who's been your partner through everything. Even Vanessa, who probably has no idea who you really are." I turned to our guests. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this. The dinner is paid for, and I hope you'll stay and enjoy it." I gathered my clutch and nodded to Sam and Mel. "I, however, will not be joining you." As I walked toward the door, Drew grabbed my arm. "You can't just walk away. We need to talk about this." I looked down at his hand until he released me. "We're beyond talking, Drew. Check your email tomorrow. My terms for a settlement are already drafted." I leaned closer. "And they're far more generous than you deserve." With that, I walked out of the Royal Oak with my head high, Mel and Sam flanking me on either side. "Are you okay?" Mel whispered as we reached the parking lot. I took a deep breath of the cool evening air, looking up at the stars emerging in the twilight sky. "No," I admitted, "but I will be." Behind us, the door to the restaurant burst open, and Vanessa stormed out, tears streaming down her face as she fumbled for her car keys. I hesitated, then called out to her. "Vanessa!" She turned, mascara streaking her cheeks. "What? Haven't you done enough?" "He's not worth crying over," I said simply. "Trust me, I wasted too many tears on him myself." She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded once before climbing into her car and driving away. As we watched her taillights disappear around the corner, Mel squeezed my hand. What now? I smiled, a real smile this time. Now? I think I'm going to take a very long vacation. As I drove away from the restaurant where my marriage had officially ended, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was mine to choose. I met Drew Mitchell during my final year of design school. He was working on his MBA and moonlighting as a bartender at a place called The Cellar, a dimly lit speakeasy where my classmates and I would go to celebrate project completions. I remember the first time I noticed him, tall, with dark hair that fell across his forehead when he leaned forward to hear drink orders over the music. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, his hazel eyes focused entirely on you when you spoke. Let me guess, he'd said the first time we talked. Gin and tonic, extra lime. I'd smiled, impressed. How did you know? You have that look, he'd replied, already reaching for the bottle. Creative, thoughtful, not trying too hard to impress anyone. He'd slid the drink across the bar with a wink. I'm Drew. Looking back, I should have recognized the practiced nature of his charm, the way he'd probably used that same line on dozens of women before me. But at 23, fresh out of college and eager to start my life, all I saw was the perfect beginning to a love story. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Weekend trips to the coast in his beat-up Jeep, picnics in the park where he'd sketch out, his dreams of starting his own construction company, late nights talking about the future, our future, over bottles of wine that we couldn't really afford. 6 months after we met, Drew proposed on the rooftop garden of the Royal Oak, down on one knee with his grandmother's ring, promising me a lifetime of adventures. My parents were cautiously optimistic. My father, a successful investment banker, insisted on a prenuptial agreement to protect the family trust I would eventually inherit. Drew had seemed offended at first. I'm not marrying you for your family's money, Jen, he'd said, his expression wounded. I would never take what's yours. My mother had tried to explain that it was standard procedure, not a reflection on his character. Still, Drew had refused to sign my parents' agreement, insisting that if we needed a legal document at all, we should draft our own, something that reflected our unique partnership. I'll have my buddy from law school draw something up, he'd told me. Something fair for both of us. When I'd finally received the document, it was 60 pages of legal jargon that made my head spin. Drew had assured me it was standard language, the same terms my parents wanted, just reworded to sound less accusatory. I trusted him. I signed without reading every page, too caught up in wedding plans and blissfully in love. That was my first mistake. The early years of our marriage were everything I'd hoped for. We lived in a small apartment downtown while I built my graphic design business, and Drew worked for a local construction firm, learning the industry from the ground up. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. When I landed my first major client, Drew had championed my success, bragging to our friends about my creativity and drive. When my parents offered to invest in his dream of starting his own construction company, he'd been humble and grateful. Mitchell Construction began as a small operation in a rented office space with just 3 employees. I designed the logo, the website, the business cards, all for free, of course. I was investing in our future just as Drew was. By our 5th anniversary, the company had grown to 30 employees with projects across 3 states. We bought our Victorian in the historic district, renovating it room by room until it was featured in a local magazine. On the surface, we were the perfect power couple. But somewhere around year 7, things began to shift. The changes were subtle at first. Drew started working later, coming home after I'd already gone to bed. His phone became a permanent attachment, always facing, down when he set it on a table, always locked with a new password. When I asked about the late nights, he'd kiss my forehead and tell me about some crisis at a job site, some client emergency that couldn't wait until morning. This is what we wanted, remember, he'd say. Success requires sacrifices. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I was busy with my own growing business, managing a team of designers and taking on higher-profile clients. It was easy to attribute the distance growing between us to our demanding careers. We were building our empire, after all. There would be time for us later. By year 10, we were living parallel lives in the same house. We maintained appearances, attending charity events together, hosting dinner parties for clients and friends, taking the obligatory vacation photos for social media. But behind closed doors, we barely spoke except to coordinate schedules or discuss household logistics. I suggested marriage counseling during our 11th year. Drew agreed, seeming genuinely concerned about the state of our relationship. He attended exactly 2 sessions before declaring it a waste of time and money. "We don't need some stranger telling us how to communicate," he'd said. "We're just going through a rough patch. It happens to everyone." So I went alone, hoping to gain some insight into how to reconnect with my husband. Dr. Franklin, a kind woman with silver-streaked hair and penetrating blue eyes, helped me see patterns I'd been blind to for years. "Jennifer," she'd said during our 4th session, "what would you do if you found out Drew was being unfaithful?" The question had caught me off guard. "He wouldn't," I'd responded automatically. "We might have our issues, but Drew isn't a cheater." Dr. Franklin had simply nodded, making a note in her pad. "It's not about whether he is or isn't. It's about understanding your own boundaries. What would be unforgivable to you?" I'd thought about it for a long moment. "Lying," I'd finally said. "Not just about fidelity, but about anything important. I could forgive a mistake, a moment of weakness. But deliberate, ongoing deception? That would mean everything between us was built on a foundation of lies." Little did I know how prophetic that session would prove to be. The first concrete evidence of Drew's infidelity came 13 years into our marriage. I was using his laptop to check our joint flight information for an upcoming business trip when a message notification popped up in the corner of the screen. From someone named Vanessa. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wearing that thing you like." I still remember the physical sensation, like the floor had dropped out from under me, my stomach lurching as if I were falling. I'd clicked on the message, opening a chain of texts that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The most recent exchange had occurred that morning, while Drew was supposedly at a breakfast meeting with investors. Even then, I hadn't confronted him. Something inside me, pride perhaps or self-preservation, kept me silent. Instead, I'd begun to pay attention in a way I hadn't for years. I started noticing the lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume on his clothes, the way he'd shower immediately upon coming home, the mysterious weekend conferences that appeared on his calendar with no corresponding email trails. I hired a private investigator 2 weeks after discovering the texts. The detailed report and photographs arrived in a plain manila envelope, confirming what I already knew. Drew was having an affair with Vanessa Collins, a 27-year-old receptionist at Apaya, one of his clients' offices. They'd been seeing each other for at least 8 months. There were photos of them entering a downtown apartment building, having dinner at restaurants on the other side of town, walking hand in hand through the park near his office. The pain was excruciating, but not for the reasons I would have expected. It wasn't jealousy or wounded love that kept me awake at night. It was the humiliation of realizing how thoroughly I'd been deceived, how willingly I'd accepted his lies, how completely I'd failed to protect myself. Mel found me sitting on my kitchen floor at 2 a.m, surrounded by the PI's photos and half a bottle of Cabernet. "Jesus, Jen," she'd whispered, sinking down beside me. "Why didn't you call me?" I'd laughed, a hollow sound. "And say what? My husband's screwing some 20-something and I'm the last to know?" Mel had wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "So what are you going to do? Confront him? Throw his stuff on the lawn? Key his precious BMW?" I'd shaken my head, gathering the photos into a neat stack. "No, I'm going to be strategic." And I was. The next morning, I'd made an appointment with Sam Cohen, our family attorney. I arrived at his office with the PI's report and a single question. What happens if I divorce Drew? Sam's answer had been sobering. It depends on the prenuptial agreement you signed. Do you have a copy? I didn't, but Sam was able to retrieve it from his firm's archives. As he read through the document, his expression grew increasingly troubled. Jennifer, he'd said finally, removing his glasses, this agreement is extremely one-sided. There's a fidelity clause that works heavily in Drew's favor. If you're unfaithful, you forfeit all rights to shared marital assets. If he's unfaithful, there's no similar penalty. I'd felt sick. He told me it was standard language, the same terms my parents wanted. Sam shook his head. This is nothing like what your parents proposed. Did you have independent legal counsel review this before you signed? I hadn't. Another mistake. Is there any way out of it? I'd asked, my voice small. Sam had studied the document again, flipping between several pages. There might be, he said slowly. The problem isn't just the infidelity clause, it's how the document defines shared assets. According to this, anything purchased with funds from Mitchell Construction isn't considered marital property, but rather Drew's separate asset. But my parents invested $200,000 to start that company, I'd protested. I designed their branding, their marketing materials. I worked alongside Drew to build that business. Sam had nodded, which is precisely why this clause might be contestable. There's a legal principle called commingling of assets. If we can prove that your contributions, both financial and professional, were instrumental in building the company, the court might view it as a marital asset regardless of what the prenup says. It was a slim hope, but it was something. Over the next several weeks, I worked with Sam to gather evidence of my contributions to Mitchell Construction. Emails, design files, meeting notes, bank transfers. I spoke with my parents about their initial investment and the terms they'd understood. I met with Drew's business partner, Kevin, under the guise of planning our upcoming anniversary party, carefully steering the conversation toward the early days of the company. You know, Kevin had said as we reviewed potential venues, Drew's lucky to have you. I remember when you pulled that all-nighter to redesign the proposal that won us the Westridge contract. Drew was ready to give up, but you wouldn't let him. I'd smiled, remembering. It had been our third year in business, and the Westridge project had put Mitchell Construction on the map. I'd worked until dawn perfecting the presentation, while Drew paced and stressed about losing to larger, more established firms. We were a team back then, I'd replied, the past tense slipping out before I could catch it. Kevin had given me a curious look but hadn't pressed. 3 months after discovering the affair, I found myself sitting across from Sam in his office again, reviewing our strategy. The pile of evidence supporting my claim to Mitchell Construction had grown substantial, but there was still a significant risk that a judge would uphold the prenuptial agreement as written. There's one more thing, Sam had said, sliding a document across his desk. I had our forensic accountant look into the company's finances, as well as your joint accounts. The report detailed a series of transfers from the company's main account to an offshore entity registered in the Cayman Islands. Similar transfers had been made from our joint savings account, smaller amounts, but consistent, dating back almost 2 years. He's been moving money, I'd said, the realization like a physical blow. Preparing to leave me. Sam had nodded grimly. It appears so. And there's more. We found evidence that he's been using company funds to pay the rent on an apartment downtown, not leased to Mitchell Construction, but to a V. Collins. I'd laughed then, a bitter sound. He's not just sleeping with her. He's setting her up for after the divorce. This changes things, Sam had explained. These transfers could constitute financial fraud, which might void the prenuptial agreement entirely. At the very least, it gives us significant leverage. That night, As I'd lain awake staring at the ceiling of our guest bedroom, I'd moved out of our master suite weeks earlier, claiming Drew's snoring was keeping me up. I'd made a decision. I wouldn't just protect what was mine. I would use Drew's own tactics against him. The next morning, I'd called the jeweler where Drew had recently made a significant purchase, a diamond pendant I'd never received. The saleswoman had gushed about how romantic Mr. Mitchell was, buying such a beautiful gift for the mother of his child. The mother of his child? I'd repeated, my voice carefully neutral. Oh, yes, she'd replied, oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped. He mentioned his girlfriend was expecting. First trimester, I believe he said. He wanted something special to celebrate. I'd thanked her and hung up, my hands remarkably steady despite the revelation. Drew wasn't just leaving me for a younger woman. He was starting a new family with her. That afternoon, I'd called Mel. I need a favor, I'd said without preamble. Anything, she'd replied instantly. I need you to help me plan the most memorable anniversary dinner the Royal Oak has ever seen. 2 days later, I'd sent out invitations to our closest friends and family, an intimate gathering to celebrate 15 years of marriage. Drew had raised an eyebrow when I'd mentioned it over breakfast. An anniversary party? I thought we'd just do dinner, the two of us. I'd smiled, spreading jam on my toast. 15 years is a milestone, Drew. I want to celebrate with everyone who's been part of our journey. He'd studied me for a moment, perhaps searching for signs that I knew about Vanessa, about the baby, about his plans to leave me. Finding none, he'd shrugged. Whatever you want, Jen. It's your party. If only he knew how true those words would prove to be. The weeks leading up to the anniversary dinner had been a careful dance of preparation and pretense. I'd maintained the facade of a devoted wife, planning a celebration of our enduring love, while quietly moving assets into accounts Drew couldn't access, gathering the last pieces of evidence we'd need, and coordinating with Sam on our legal strategy. I'd even gone shopping for a new dress, the black cocktail number that had fit me so perfectly on the night everything changed. Mel had accompanied me, offering support and practical advice as I'd tried on outfit after outfit. You need something that says, I'm not devastated, I'm dangerous, she'd declared, rejecting a conservative blue sheath. Something that reminds him exactly what he's giving up. When I'd emerged from the dressing room in the black dress with its subtle cutouts and perfect fit, Mel had whistled low. That's the one. When Drew sees you in that, he'll realize his midlife crisis is about to become a full-blown disaster. I'd laughed, turning to examine my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked confident, powerful, nothing like the devastated wife I'd been 3 months earlier. It's not about Drew anymore, I'd said. It's about me taking back what's mine. The night before the anniversary dinner, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of our guest bedroom, looking out at the garden I'd painstakingly designed when we'd first bought the house. The roses were just beginning to bloom, their pale petals luminous in the moonlight. I'd planted them the same week Drew and I had moved in, envisioning years of cutting fresh flowers for our dinner table, watching the garden mature as our marriage deepened. So many dreams, so carefully cultivated, only to wither under the harsh reality of Drew's betrayal. A text from Mel had broken my reverie. You ready for tomorrow, warrior princess? I'd smiled at her nickname for me. Since discovering Drew's affair, Mel had taken to calling me a warrior, reminding me of my strength, when I'd forgotten it myself. As ready as I'll ever be, I'd replied. Remember, she'd texted back. Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already won by refusing to be a victim. She was right, of course. The moment I'd decided to fight back instead of crumbling, I'd reclaimed something essential. My agency, my self-respect, my future. Morning had dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the guest room curtains as I'd opened my eyes. For a moment, I'd forgotten what day it was, stretching contentedly, in the peaceful quiet. Then reality had crashed back. Today was the day everything would change. Drew had already left for work when I'd made my way downstairs, finding his hastily scrawled note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting. See you tonight at the restaurant. Happy anniversary. D. No mention of love, no terms of endearment. Just a perfunctory acknowledgement of the date. 15 years of marriage reduced to a post-it note stuck to the coffee maker. I'd spent the day in careful preparation, a session at the salon for a blowout and subtle makeup, a manicure in a deep burgundy that matched my lipstick, last-minute calls to Edward at the Royal Oak to confirm every detail of the evening's arrangements. Sam had checked in around noon, confirming he had all the necessary documents prepared. "Are you certain you want to do it this way?" he'd asked. "We could still handle this privately without the audience." I'd considered his question carefully. Part of me, the private, dignified part that had been raised to keep family matters behind closed doors, was hesitant about the public nature of what I was planning. But another part, the part that had been silently suffering Drew's betrayal while maintaining appearances for months, craved the justice of the moment. "I'm sure," I'd replied finally. "Drew chose to humiliate me by flaunting his affair. He doesn't get to dictate the terms of how this ends." As I'd zipped up my dress that evening, I'd caught sight of my wedding ring glinting in the vanity light. I'd twisted it thoughtfully, remembering the day Drew had slipped it onto my finger, his eyes bright with promises I'd believed with my whole heart. After a moment's hesitation, I'd removed it, placing it in my jewelry box alongside other mementos of a past that no longer defined me. The woman who'd stood before that mirror wasn't the same one who had walked down the aisle 15 years earlier. She was stronger now, wiser, unwilling to accept less than she deserved. As I'd applied my lipstick with a steady hand, I'd made myself a silent promise. After tonight, I would never again allow someone else to determine my worth. My phone had chimed with a text from the car service I'd arranged. The driver was outside, ready to take me to the Royal Oak. I'd taken one final look around the bedroom that had witnessed so much of my life with Drew, wondering if I would feel nostalgic or sentimental. Instead, I'd felt only a calm certainty that I was doing exactly what needed to be done. The drive to the restaurant had passed in contemplative silence, the city lights blurring as we'd made our way downtown. I'd rehearsed what I would say, how I would react when Drew arrived with Vanessa, the precise moment when I would reveal what I knew. But beneath all the planning was a simple truth. After tonight, I would be free. The Royal Oak had looked exactly as I'd remembered from that night years ago when Drew had proposed. Elegant, timeless, with its stunning river views and impeccable service. Edward had greeted me personally, escorting me to the private dining room where everything was arranged according to my specifications. The flowers, white roses and blue hydrangeas, had caught the light from the chandelier, casting delicate shadows across the crisp white tablecloth. I'd moved to the window, watching the sunset paint the river in stunning colors, feeling oddly peaceful despite what was to come. Behind me, the door had opened and Sam had entered, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. "You look stunning," he'd said, placing his briefcase on a chair near the door. And that's when I knew, not just intellectually, but with bone-deep certainty, that I was ready for whatever the evening might bring. The drive home from the Royal Oak was surreal. Streetlights blurred past as Mel navigated through the quiet streets of Oak Ridge, the radio playing softly in the background. Sam had taken his own car, promising to meet us at my house in the morning, to discuss next steps. I leaned my head against the cool window, letting the events of the evening replay in my mind. "You were magnificent," Mel said, breaking the silence. The look on Drew's face when Sam pulled out those documents. "I wish." I'd taken a picture. I smiled faintly. "It wasn't about humiliating him." "No?" Mel arched an eyebrow, glancing at me. "Not even a little bit?" I considered this. Maybe a little, I admitted. But mostly it was about taking back control. For so long I've been reacting to Drew's lies, his manipulation. Tonight, I finally wrote my own ending to the story. Mel reached over and squeezed my hand, and what an ending it was. She turned onto my street, slowing as we approached the Victorian. Do you want me to stay over? I don't like the idea of you being alone. I'm fine, I assured her, though the thought of walking into the empty house did make my stomach clench. I need some time to process everything. Mel looked skeptical but nodded. Call me if you need anything, and I mean anything, even if it's just someone to drink wine with at 3 a.m. I promised I would, though we both knew I probably wouldn't. Growing up in my family, self-sufficiency had been prized above almost everything else. My father's voice echoed in my memory. Mitchells don't fall apart, Jennifer. We adapt and overcome. It was a lesson I'd taken to heart, sometimes to my own detriment. As Mel's car disappeared around the corner, I stood on the sidewalk looking up at the house Drew and I had shared for nearly a decade. The porch light cast a warm glow across the front steps, welcoming me home. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of a life I no longer lived. Taking a deep breath, I walked up the path, fishing my keys from my clutch. The house was quiet, the only sound the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. A wedding gift from Drew's parents. I kicked off my heels, leaving them by the door, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. The dinner I'd prepared that morning, a salad and lasagna for one, sat in the refrigerator, but I had no appetite. Instead, I poured myself a generous glass of Merlot and carried it upstairs to my bedroom. The guest room I'd been sleeping in for the past months felt temporary, like a hotel room rather than a space that belonged to me. My clothes hung neatly in the closet, my toiletries arranged on the bathroom counter, but there was nothing personal about it. No photographs, no mementos, nothing that spoke of who I was or what mattered to me. I set my wine on the nightstand and unzipped my dress, letting it pool at my feet. Standing in my slip, I caught sight of myself in the mirror and paused. The woman reflected back at me looked different somehow, not just physically, though the past months of stress and gym sessions had certainly changed my appearance. There was something in her eyes, a quiet determination that hadn't been there before. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. I tensed, expecting Drew's name to appear on the screen. Instead, it was a text from Kevin. That was quite a dinner. If you need anything, Caroline and I are here for you. I smiled, touched by his support. Drew had always claimed that Kevin was his friend, part of his network. It was comforting to discover that not all of our social connections would dissolve with our marriage. I was about to respond when the doorbell rang, the sound jarring in the quiet house. My heart rate spiked. Who would be visiting at nearly 11 at night? Drew had a key, though he'd been staying at Vanessa's apartment more often than not in recent weeks. Still, I couldn't imagine him coming here after what had happened at the restaurant. Slipping on my robe, I made my way downstairs, peering through the peephole. Vanessa stood on my porch, arms wrapped around herself, mascara streaking her pale cheeks. I hesitated, wondering if I should pretend I wasn't home. What could she possibly want now? Curiosity won out. I unlocked the door and opened it, keeping my expression neutral. Vanessa. She looked up, her red-rimmed eyes widening slightly as if she was surprised I'd answered. I know it's late, she said, her voice hoarse. I need to talk. To you. I considered sending her away. I'd already had my confrontation for the evening. I wasn't eager for round 2. But something in her expression, desperation perhaps, or genuine distress, made me step back, gesturing for her to enter. Thank you, she murmured, stepping into the foyer. She looked around, taking in the high ceilings, the antique furniture, the framed photographs that still included Drew. "Your home is beautiful." "Thank you," I replied, leading her to the living room. "Would you like something to drink? Water? Tea?" She shook her head, perching awkwardly on the edge of the sofa. "I can't stay long. I needed to ask you something." I sat in the armchair across from her, tucking my robe around my legs. "Go ahead." Vanessa took a deep breath, her hands unconsciously moving to her stomach in a protective gesture. "Did you know?" she asked. "About the baby, I mean, before tonight." I nodded. "I found out a few weeks ago." "And you still invited him to the anniversary dinner? Knowing he was going to leave you for me?" The question contained so many assumptions that I had to stifle a laugh. "I invited him because I knew exactly what he was planning, Vanessa. He was going to use our anniversary dinner to publicly end our marriage, making himself the reasonable one while I played the hysterical, discarded wife." I leaned back in my chair. "I simply decided to change the script." She flinched, her gaze dropping to her hands. "He told me you were cold," she said softly. "Calculating, always 3 steps ahead." "And what do you think now?" I asked. Vanessa looked up, meeting my eyes. "I think he underestimated you." She twisted the ring on her right hand, not an engagement ring, I noticed, despite the fact that she was carrying his child. "After you left, everything fell apart. Drew's father was furious, called him a disgrace to the family name. His mother couldn't stop crying. All those people, your friends, they looked at us like we were monsters." I said nothing, letting her continue. "We left right after you did. Drew he was different, angry, scared. He kept saying it wasn't over, that you couldn't just take everything he'd built." She swallowed hard. "We went back to my apartment and he got drunk, really drunk. Started making these calls, trying to reach his lawyer, talking about fighting the prenup, exposing you somehow." A cold knot formed in my stomach. I'd expected Drew to fight back, of course, but hearing it confirmed made it real. "What happened then?" Vanessa's eyes filled with fresh tears. "He said things. About me. About the baby. He said he never wanted." Her voice broke. "He said I trapped him, that he never would have left you if I hadn't gotten pregnant." I felt a surge of unexpected sympathy for her. Despite everything, Vanessa was also one of Drew's victims, manipulated and misled just as I had been. "Did he hurt you?" I asked, suddenly concerned. She shook her head quickly. "No, nothing like that. He just said things he can't take back." She wiped at her cheeks with the back of her hand. "I told him to leave, that I needed time to think. He's staying at some hotel downtown." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Whatever anger I felt toward Vanessa had dissipated, replaced by a weary recognition of our shared experience. Drew has a talent for making people believe whatever version of himself he wants them to see. Vanessa nodded, a bitter smile touching her lips. I thought I was special, the one who really understood him, who could give him what he needed. She laughed softly. "God, that sounds pathetic now." "It's not pathetic," I said. "It's human. We all want to be chosen, to be special to someone." She studied me for a long moment. "How did you do it? Stay so calm tonight when everything was falling apart?" I considered her question. "Practice," I said finally. "I've had months to process what Drew did, to move through the hurt and anger to something else. And I had a plan, which helps." "A plan," she repeated. "So what happens now? With the company, with the house, with—" She gestured vaguely between us. "The legal details will take time to sort out," I explained. "But essentially, the prenuptial agreement Drew created works against him now. The Fidelity clause he included means he forfeits his claim to our shared assets, including Mitchell Construction. Vanessa's eyes widened. The whole company? But that's everything to him. I know, I said simply. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. What about me? And the baby? That's between you and Drew, I said gently. I have no interest in punishing you or your child for Drew's choices. Whatever child support or financial arrangements you work out with him are your business. Vanessa looked relieved, then embarrassed. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked that. It's not your problem. No, I agreed. It's not. But I understand why you'd be concerned. She stood, smoothing her hands over her dress. I should go. Thank you for talking to me, for not slamming the door in my face. I walked her to the foyer, opening the front door. Vanessa, I said as she stepped onto the porch. A word of advice? She turned, waiting. Don't believe anything Drew tells you about the divorce proceedings or his financial situation. Verify everything through your own lawyer. He's going to try to hide assets, claim poverty, anything to protect himself. She nodded, a new resolve in her expression. I will. Thank you. As I watched her walk to her car, I felt an odd sense of closure. The conversation with Vanessa had humanized her in a way that the dramatic confrontation at the restaurant hadn't. She wasn't the predatory other woman of my imagination, but a young woman who'd made poor choices and was now facing the consequences. Back inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the evening had dissipated, leaving me drained. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, slipping out of my robe and into a well-worn t-shirt I used as a nightgown. As I settled into bed, my phone buzzed again. Drew's name appeared on the screen along with a lengthy text. We need to talk. What you did tonight was unforgivable. I'm meeting with my lawyer tomorrow. This isn't over, Jennifer. You can't just take everything I've worked for based on one mistake. I read the message twice, noting the familiar pattern, Drew positioning himself as the victim, minimizing his actions as one mistake, threatening legal action to intimidate me. Months ago, such a message would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety and doubt. Now, I simply set the phone down without responding and turned off the light. Let him rage, let him threaten, let him plot and scheme. I had truth, evidence, and the law on my side. More importantly, I had myself back. The self I'd surrendered piece by piece during our marriage. The self that had been gradually erased by Drew's subtle manipulation and my own willingness to shrink to accommodate his ambitions. Sleep came surprisingly easily, deep and dreamless. The next morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the curtains I'd forgotten to close. For a moment, I lay still, orienting myself in time and space. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back. The dinner, the confrontation, Vanessa's late-night visit. I reached for my phone, finding several more texts from Drew, each more threatening than the last. I deleted them without reading beyond the previews and scrolled through the others, supportive messages from friends who'd been at the dinner, a check-in from Mel, a reminder from Sam about our meeting later that morning. The house felt different somehow, as if the very air had changed overnight. I padded downstairs in my robe to make coffee, pausing in the doorway of Drew's home office. It had always been his domain, a space I rarely entered out of respect for his privacy. Now, looking at the mahogany desk and leather chair, the shelves of business books and industry awards, I saw it for what it was, a carefully constructed shrine to his self-image. The coffee had just finished brewing when the doorbell rang. I checked the time. Barely 8 o'clock. Too early for Sam, who wasn't due until 10. Through the peephole, I saw Drew's parents standing on my porch, his mother clutching her purse with white-knuckled hands, his father's expression grim. I hesitated, debating whether to answer. I'd always been fond of Margaret and Richard Mitchell. Unlike their son, they had been consistently kind and supportive throughout my marriage to Drew. They didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of our divorce. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. "Margaret, Richard, this is a surprise." Margaret stepped forward immediately, enveloping me in a tight hug. "Oh, Jennifer," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We are so sorry." Richard nodded, his weathered face creased with concern. "We needed to see you, to talk to you face to face." I stepped back, gesturing for them to enter. "Please, come in. I've just made coffee." They followed me to the kitchen, settling at the island while I poured 3 mugs. The familiar domesticity of the scene was surreal, given the circumstances. How many Sunday brunches had the 4 of us shared in this kitchen, planning holidays, discussing family news, sharing meals? Now everything was fractured, the easy rapport replaced by an awkward tension. "Jennifer," Richard began, his hands wrapped around his mug, "we want you to know that we don't condone what Drew has done. Not the affair, not the pregnancy, and certainly not the way he tried to manipulate the financial aspects of your marriage." Margaret nodded emphatically. "We raised him better than this. I keep asking myself where we went wrong." "You didn't," I assured her, touched by their evident distress. "Drew made his own choices." Richard sighed heavily. "He called us last night, after the dinner. Tried to convince us that you had set him up, that you had been planning to take the company from him all along." He shook his head. "Even now, he can't take responsibility for his actions." "That's always been Drew's way," I said softly. "Everything is someone else's fault, never his." Margaret wiped at her eyes with a tissue. "He was so different as a boy. Sensitive, thoughtful. Somewhere along the way, he changed. I remembered the early days of our relationship, when Drew had seemed so genuine, so in tune with my feelings and needs. Had that all been an act? Or had success corrupted something essential in him, turning ambition into greed, confidence into arrogance? "What happens now?" Richard asked, bringing me back to the present. "With the company, I mean." "Drew said you're trying to take control of Mitchell Construction." I chose my words carefully. "The legal situation is complicated. The prenuptial agreement Drew created included clauses that work against him now that he's been unfaithful. My lawyer is handling the details." Richard nodded, unsurprised. "Drew always thought he was the smartest person in the room. Looks like that finally came back to bite him." He hesitated, then asked, "What about the employees? The projects in progress?" Mitchell Construction employs nearly 100 people now. The question touched on something I'd been considering since discovering Drew's affair. Whatever happened between us personally, I didn't want innocent employees to suffer. "I have no intention of dismantling the company or disrupting ongoing projects," I assured him. "My goal is to ensure a stable transition of leadership, not to destroy what's been built." The relief on both their faces was palpable. "Thank you," Margaret said, reaching across the island to squeeze my hand. "Those people depend on their jobs. It would break my heart to see them suffer because of Drew's poor choices." We talked for nearly an hour, sipping coffee as they shared their perspective on the previous night's events. Drew had apparently called them immediately after leaving the restaurant, attempting to rally their support against me. Instead, they'd been horrified by what he'd done, both to me and to the pregnant Vanessa. "We want you to know that you'll always be family to us," Margaret said as they prepared to leave. "No matter what happens with the divorce, you're still our daughter." Richard nodded in agreement. "And if there's anything we can do to help with the transition at the company, any introductions we can make or information we can provide, you just say the word." Their support was unexpected and deeply moving. As I hugged them goodbye at the door, I felt a rush of gratitude for these two people who had welcomed me into their family and continued to stand by me even as their relationship with their son was strained by his actions. Watching their car pull away, I realized how much I'd been bracing for battle on all fronts. I'd expected Drew's family to close ranks around him, for our shared friends to feel forced to choose sides, for the entire social structure of my life to collapse along with my marriage. The reality was proving more nuanced. Some relationships were strengthening even as others dissolved. I was tidying the kitchen when my phone rang, Sam's number flashing on the screen. "Good morning," I answered, wedging the phone between my ear and shoulder as I loaded mugs into the dishwasher. "Jennifer?" Sam's voice was grave. "I've just received a call from Drew's lawyer. They're contesting the prenuptial agreement on grounds of duress and misrepresentation." I closed the dishwasher, focusing on our conversation. "That's not unexpected. What specifically are they claiming?" "That you pressured Drew into including the fidelity clause, knowing you would use it against him later. They're also arguing that Mitchell Construction should be excluded from the marital assets because your contributions were work for hire rather than partnership investments." I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "That's absurd. I have emails, contracts, meeting notes, all documenting my role in building the company." "I know," Sam assured me. "Their argument won't hold up under scrutiny. But they're also requesting an emergency hearing to prevent you from making any changes to the company leadership or financial structure until the divorce is settled." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too confining. I moved to the living room, pacing as I considered this development. They're trying to maintain the status quo so Drew can continue moving assets offshore. "Exactly," Sam agreed. "I've already filed a counter motion requesting forensic accounting of all company and personal accounts associated with Drew, as well as a freeze on any international transfers. But there's something else." "What?" "Drew is claiming that you breached a confidentiality clause in the prenup by discussing the terms publicly at the anniversary dinner. He's seeking damages." I stopped pacing, anger flaring hot and bright. "He brought his pregnant girlfriend to our anniversary dinner to publicly humiliate me, and he's claiming I breached confidentiality?" "It's a desperate move," Sam said, calmly. "But we need to be prepared for a fight. Drew has significant resources and connections. This could get messy." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think strategically rather than emotionally. "What's our next step?" "The emergency hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. You'll need to be there, prepared to testify about your role in Mitchell Construction and the events leading up to the dinner last night." "I'll be ready," I promised. After hanging up, I stood by the window, looking out at the garden I'd so carefully cultivated over the years. The roses were in full bloom, their pale petals catching the morning light. There was a metaphor there, I thought. Beauty emerging from thorny stems, resilience in delicate forms. Drew was fighting back, just as I'd expected he would. He wouldn't surrender his empire easily, wouldn't accept that his own actions had triggered the very clauses he'd created to protect himself. He would use every resource, every connection, every legal maneuver to maintain control of what he considered his. But I was ready for him. I'd spent months preparing for this battle, gathering evidence, building my case, securing allies, and, unlike Drew, I had nothing to hide. My phone buzzed with a text from Mel. "How are you holding up? Need backup for today?" I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. "I'm okay," I replied. "Meeting with Sam at 10. Drew's lawyer is contesting the prenup." Her response was immediate. "Of course he is. The man never met a reality he couldn't try to rewrite. Want me to bring lunch after your meeting? We can strategize." "That would be great," I texted back. "And Mel? Thank you for everything." I set my phone down and headed upstairs to shower and dress for my meeting with Sam. As the hot water cascaded over me, I found myself thinking about the path that had led me here. If I had confronted Drew immediately upon discovering his affair, would things have unfolded differently? If I had been less strategic, more emotional in my response, would I now be fighting from a position of weakness rather than strength? There was no way to know, of course. But as I stepped out of the shower and wrapped myself in a towel, I felt a profound certainty that I had made the right choice in taking the time to prepare, to gather evidence, to position myself for the battle ahead. Drew had always underestimated me, viewing my accommodating nature as weakness rather than conscious choice. That misperception had been his first mistake. His second had been believing that his careful manipulations would shield him from consequences. His third, and perhaps most damaging, had been assuming that I would crumble in the face of his betrayal. Each of these miscalculations had led him to this moment, his carefully constructed life unraveling thread by thread, while I stood firm, prepared for whatever came next. As I dressed in a tailored navy suit that projected confidence and professionalism, I thought about Vanessa, alone in her apartment with the weight of an unplanned pregnancy and the dawning realization that the man she'd trusted had been lying to her as well. I thought about Drew's parents, grappling with their son's choices and their place in the aftermath. I thought about the employees of Mitchell Construction, unknowingly caught in the turbulence of our personal drama. So many lives affected by one man's selfishness and deceit. The ripples spread outward, touching everyone in Drew's orbit, including me. But unlike the others, I had seen it coming. I had prepared. I had armored myself against the impact. And now, as I fastened a simple pearl necklace, a gift from my grandmother on my wedding day, I was ready to face whatever came next. Not as Drew Mitchell's wife, not as a victim of his betrayal, but as Jennifer Mitchell, a woman who had finally reclaimed her own story. The courthouse was a massive structure of limestone and marble, its steps worn smooth by decades of footsteps. I paused at the entrance, taking a moment to steady my breathing before pulling open the heavy door. Sam was waiting in the lobby, his briefcase tucked under one arm, his expression reassuringly calm. "Ready?" he asked as I approached. I nodded, smoothing the lapel of my jacket. As ready as I'll ever be. We made our way through security and up to the 4th floor where the emergency hearing was scheduled. The hallway outside the courtroom was crowded with people, attorneys conferring with clients, court officers directing traffic, anxious family members waiting for their cases to be called. Just another day of personal dramas playing out in the public arena of the legal system. Sam checked his watch. "We have about 20 minutes. Drew's attorney filed a new motion this morning." "What now?" "He's claiming that you used confidential information obtained through your role as Drew's spouse to gain an unfair advantage in business negotiations. Specifically, that you leveraged knowledge of Mitchell Construction's financials to secure clients for your design business who were previously contracted with the company." I frowned. "That's completely fabricated. I've never approached Mitchell. Construction clients for my own business." "I know," Sam said, guiding me to a quiet corner of the hallway. "It's a desperate move, meant to muddy the waters and paint you as opportunistic rather than victimized. The judge will see through it, but we need to be prepared to address it." Before I could respond, a commotion at the end of the hallway drew our attention. Drew had arrived, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits, his attorney Gerald Hoffman, a shark-like litigator known for his aggressive tactics, and a younger associate laden with document boxes. Unlike the confident, charming man who had dominated social gatherings throughout our marriage, Drew looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a grim set to his mouth. Our gazes met across the crowded hallway, and for a brief moment, something like regret flickered across his face. Then his expression hardened, and he turned away, conferring with Hoffman in hushed tones. "Don't engage," Sam murmured, noting the direction of my gaze. "Let them make the first move." We didn't have to wait long. As the courtroom doors opened and people began filing in, Hoffman approached us, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, deliberately dropping the Mrs. that had preceded my name for 15 years. "A moment, if you don't mind." Sam stepped slightly in front of me, his posture protective. "Any communication needs to go through counsel. Gerald, you know that." Hoffman's smile tightened. "Of course. Then let me speak to you, Samuel. My client is prepared to be generous, despite the theatrical display at the anniversary dinner." He glanced at me, his disdain evident. "We're willing to offer a lump sum settlement of $2 million, plus the house and her design business intact. In exchange, she walks away from Mitchell Construction completely." Sam raised an eyebrow. "That's significantly less than she's entitled to under the terms of the prenuptial agreement." "A prenup that was signed under duress and with clear misrepresentation," Hoffman countered smoothly. "We both know it won't hold up under scrutiny. This offer represents Mr. Mitchell's desire to resolve this matter quickly and amicably." I had to stifle a laugh at his characterization of Drew's motives. There was nothing amicable about contests over tens of millions of dollars. "We'll need to discuss your offer," Sam replied, his tone professional but cool. Though I should point out that my client's evidence of Mr. Mitchell's financial improprieties goes well beyond the scope of the prenuptial agreement. The offshore accounts, the misappropriation of company funds, the tax implications. He let the sentence hang. In the air, a subtle threat. Hoffman's confidence faltered slightly. "Allegations without merit. My client operates his business with complete transparency." "Then he has nothing to worry about when the forensic accountants complete their audit," Sam said with a shrug. "We'll see you inside." As Hoffman retreated to where Drew was waiting, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. $2 million, I murmured. "He thinks he can buy me off that cheaply?" "It's a starting position," Sam explained. "They're testing to see if you're motivated by quick cash, or if you're in this for the long haul." "I'm not interested in a settlement that lets Drew walk away with the company," I said firmly. "Not after everything he's done." Sam nodded, unsurprised by my response. "Then let's go make that clear to the judge." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, intimate almost, with dark wood paneling and portrait photographs of previous judges lining the walls. We took our seats at the plaintiff's table, arranging our documents in neat stacks. Across the aisle, Drew and his legal team did the same, though their stack of paperwork was considerably larger. A typical tactic, Sam had explained, to create the impression of overwhelming evidence. Judge Elena Ramirez entered from a side door, a diminutive woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Good morning," she said, taking her seat at the bench. "We're here on the matter of Mitchell versus Mitchell emergency. Motions regarding asset control during divorce proceedings." She glanced down at the papers before her. "This is quite a stack of emergency filings for a case that hasn't even had its initial hearing. Someone want to explain why we need to address these matters today?" Hoffman stood. "Your Honor, Gerald." Hoffman representing Andrew Mitchell. "We've filed for emergency relief because Mrs. Mitchell has taken action to seize control of Mitchell Construction, a company solely owned and operated by my client, based on a misinterpreted clause in their prenuptial agreement." Judge Ramirez turned to Sam. "And your position, counsel?" Sam rose. "Samuel Cohen representing Jennifer Mitchell, Your Honor." The prenuptial agreement, which was drafted by Mr. Mitchell's previous attorney, contains a clear fidelity clause that Mr. Mitchell has violated. Moreover, we have evidence that Mr. Mitchell has been systematically moving company assets offshore in preparation for divorce proceedings, which necessitates immediate action to protect those assets. The judge nodded, her expression neutral. "I've reviewed the prenuptial agreement in question. Mr. Hoffman, are you contesting the validity of this document?" "Yes, Your Honor," Hoffman replied. "The agreement was signed under duress, with Mrs. Mitchell pressuring my client to include clauses that were contrary to his interests. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud at this complete reversal of reality. Drew had been the one insisting on the prenup, carefully, crafting it to protect his interests while minimizing mine. The fact that he'd inadvertently trapped himself with the fidelity clause was pure irony. Judge Ramirez appeared equally skeptical. The agreement was signed 15 years ago, Mr. Hoffman. Has your client ever attempted to revise or contest it prior to these proceedings? No, Your Honor, but... And the notarized signature on the document is indeed your client's. Hoffman shifted uncomfortably. Yes, but the circumstances... Let's set aside the validity question for the moment. The judge interrupted, clearly unimpressed with Hoffman's argument. Mr. Cohen, regarding the emergency nature of your motion to freeze Mr. Mitchell's assets, can you provide evidence of these alleged offshore transfers? Sam approached the bench, presenting a thick folder. Yes, Your Honor. These bank records show a pattern of transfers from Mitchell Construction's operating accounts to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, beginning approximately 18 months ago and increasing in frequency and amount over the past 6 months. The judge reviewed the documents carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page. After several minutes, she looked up. Mr. Hoffman, would you care to explain these transfers? Hoffman conferred briefly with Drew, then addressed the court. Your Honor, these transactions represent legitimate business investments. Mitchell Construction has been expanding its international presence, requiring capital allocation to overseas entities. Interesting, Judge Ramirez said dryly. And the company's board approved these investments? Drew leaned forward, whispering urgently to Hoffman, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Your Honor, as sole owner, Mr. Mitchell doesn't require board approval for operational decisions. I see. The judge turned to Sam. Mr. Cohen, does your client contest Mr. Mitchell's characterization of his role in the company? Yes, Your Honor, Sam replied. Mrs. Mitchell's family provided the initial investment capital for Mitchell Construction. She has served as the company's creative director since its founding and holds 20% of the company's shares according to the incorporation documents. This was news to me. I had known about my parents' investment, of course, and my work for the company was well documented. But Drew had always maintained that he was the sole owner, that my contributions were as his wife rather than as a formal partner in the business. Drew's face had gone pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. He whispered something to Hoffman, who shook his head slightly. Judge Ramirez reviewed another document from our file, then looked directly at Drew. Mr. Mitchell, are you prepared to testify under oath about the ownership structure of your company? Drew hesitated, glancing at Hoffman, who nodded reluctantly. Yes, Your Honor, Drew said, his voice less confident than usual. Then let's hear it. Please approach the stand. As Drew was sworn in, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching a play rather than the unraveling of my former life. The man on the witness stand, handsome still despite his disheveled appearance with the same strong jawline and expressive eyes that had attracted me 15 years ago, seemed like a stranger now. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Ramirez began, please describe the founding of Mitchell Construction and its current ownership structure. Drew cleared his throat. I founded the company in 2010, after working in the industry for several years. My then-fiancée, Jennifer's parents provided an initial investment of $200,000, which was structured as a loan, not equity. He glanced at me, then back to the judge. The company is solely owned by me, though Jennifer has occasionally provided design services on a freelance basis. Occasionally? The judge repeated, referencing a document before her. According to these invoices and project files, Mrs. Mitchell designed the company's brand identity, website, all marketing materials, and provided design input on over 70% of the company's major projects. Drew shifted in his seat. Yes, but those were services provided as my wife, not as a formal business partner. I see. Judge Ramirez turned to another document. And this incorporation filing from 2010, which lists Jennifer Mitchell as holding 20% of the company's shares, is this accurate? A flush crept up Drew's neck. That was a preliminary filing, Your Honor. The actual structure was revised before the company formally began operations. Do you have documentation of this revision? Drew looked to Hoffman, who shook his head slightly. Not with me, Your Honor, but it exists. The judge's skepticism was palpable. And the $200,000 investment from Mrs. Mitchell's parents, you characterized this as a loan. Has it been repaid? Not fully, Drew admitted. We had an informal arrangement for repayment over time. Written or verbal? Verbal primarily, but there were some emails discussing terms. Judge Ramirez nodded, making a note. Now, regarding these offshore transfers, the documentation provided by Mr. Cohen indicates nearly $7 million has been moved from Mitchell Construction accounts to this Cayman entity over the past 18 months. What specific international projects necessitated these transfers? Drew hesitated, his confident facade cracking further. We've been exploring development opportunities in several Caribbean markets. The funds were positioned for potential land acquisitions and pre-development costs. And yet, the judge continued, consulting another document, Mitchell Construction's website, project portfolio, and annual reports make no mention of any international projects, in development or otherwise. Can you explain this discrepancy? We've been keeping these initiatives confidential until they're further along, Drew replied, his voice strained. It's a competitive industry. The questioning continued for nearly an hour, with Judge Ramirez methodically dismantling Drew's explanations for the offshore accounts, the company's ownership structure, and his characterization of my role in the business. With each evasion and half-truth, Drew's credibility diminished further, his earlier confidence replaced by defensive irritation. Finally, Judge Ramirez dismissed Drew from the stand and called a brief recess to review all the evidence presented. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of Drew in the hallway, huddled with Hoffman and looking distinctly worried. The sight brought me no particular satisfaction, just a weary acceptance that the man I had married was capable of lying not just to me and Vanessa, but to a judge under oath. Mel was waiting in the hallway, having slipped into the back of the courtroom midway through the proceedings. "Holy smokes," she whispered, linking her arm through mine as we found a quiet corner. "Drew is tanking in there. Did you see the judge's face when he tried to explain those offshore accounts?" I nodded, feeling the tension of the morning finally catching up with me. It's going better than expected, but it's not over yet. Jennifer. The voice behind me was familiar, Drew's father, Richard, accompanied by Margaret. They approached hesitantly, aware of the delicacy of their position. "Richard, Margaret," I said, surprised to see them. "I didn't know you were here." Margaret stepped forward, her expression determined despite the emotional strain evident in her eyes. "We told you that we stand with you in this. We meant it." Richard nodded in agreement. "We filed an affidavit confirming that our investment in Mitchell Construction was intended as seed capital for a company that would be jointly owned and operated by both you and Drew. We also provided copies of all communication related to that investment." I was momentarily speechless, touched by their unwavering support despite the personal cost to their relationship with their son. "Thank you," I managed finally. "I know how difficult this must be for you both." Margaret squeezed my hand. "No more difficult than what you've endured, dear." Before we could continue our conversation, the courtroom doors reopened, and the bailiff called for all parties to return. As we took our seats, I noticed that Drew was pointedly avoiding looking at his parents, his jaw tight with anger at what he clearly perceived as their betrayal. Judge Ramirez resumed her position at the bench, her expression grave. Having reviewed the evidence and testimony presented today, I'm ready to rule on the emergency motions before me. She fixed Drew with a stern gaze. Mr. Mitchell, I find your testimony regarding the ownership structure of Mitchell Construction and the purpose of the offshore transfers to be evasive at best and deliberately misleading at worst. Drew stiffened but remained silent as the judge continued. The prenuptial agreement, which you do not deny signing, contains a clear fidelity clause with specific consequences for infidelity, consequences that you yourself requested be included. She shuffled through some papers before her. Given your admission of an extramarital relationship resulting in pregnancy and the substantial evidence of financial impropriety presented by Mrs. Mitchell's counsel, I am granting the emergency motion to freeze all assets of Mitchell Construction pending full forensic accounting. Hoffman began to object, but Judge Ramirez held up a hand to silence him. Additionally, I am appointing a neutral third-party receiver to oversee the day-to-day operations of the company until ownership can be definitively established in subsequent proceedings. Neither Mr. nor Mrs. Mitchell will have unilateral authority to make significant financial or operational decisions during this period. She turned to me. Mrs. Mitchell, while I am sympathetic to your position, I cannot grant your request for immediate transfer of ownership based solely on the prenuptial agreement's fidelity clause. That matter will require more extensive hearings. However, given your documented role in the company's founding and operations, I am granting you continued access to your office and design responsibilities. It wasn't everything we'd asked for, but it was a significant victory nonetheless. Drew would no longer be able to drain the company's assets or make unilateral decisions that could impact its value. The appointment of a receiver meant neutral oversight until the full divorce proceedings could address the ownership question. Judge Ramirez wrapped up the hearing with instructions for both legal teams to prepare for more extensive proceedings in the coming weeks. As we gathered our documents, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. The legal battle was just beginning, but already the company that Drew and I had built together, the manifestation of our shared dreams and hard work, was being parceled out by strangers. Outside the courtroom, Drew caught up to me, waving off Hoffman's attempt to intervene. Jennifer, wait. Can we talk? Privately? I glanced at Sam, who gave a slight nod. 5 minutes, I agreed, following Drew to a secluded alcove away from the crowds. For a moment, he simply looked at me, a kaleidoscope of emotions playing across his face. Anger, regret, calculation, and something that might have been genuine remorse. You didn't have to do this, he said finally. We could have worked something out between us. Like what, Drew? I asked, keeping my voice level. You emptying our accounts and running off with Vanessa? You moving millions offshore while leaving me with the house and a token settlement? That kind of working it out? He had the grace to look ashamed, if only briefly. I made mistakes, I admit that. But destroying everything we built, humiliating me in front of our friends and family, was that really necessary? Was bringing your pregnant girlfriend to our anniversary dinner necessary? I countered. Was lying to me for months, years maybe, necessary? Was drafting a prenup designed to leave me with nothing if we divorced necessary? I shook my head. You created this situation, Drew, not me. He leaned against the wall, suddenly looking exhausted. What do you want, Jennifer? Really? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? Revenge had never been my primary motivation, despite the satisfaction of seeing Drew face consequences for his actions. Security, certainly. Financial, and otherwise. Justice, in the sense of a fair division of what we'd built together. But beyond that? I want what I've earned, I said finally. My share of the company, recognition for my contributions, and the freedom to move forward without your lies and manipulation hanging over me. Drew nodded slowly, as if processing this. And there's no chance of reconciliation for the sake of everything we've built? The question was so unexpected, so fundamentally disconnected from reality, that I almost laughed. You're having a baby with another woman, Drew. You've been systematically moving assets offshore to cheat me, in divorce. And now you're asking if we can reconcile? I studied his face, trying to determine if he was serious or simply attempting another manipulation. Vanessa and I, he began, then stopped, reconsidering his words. It's complicated. The baby. I'm not sure it's even mine. The statement hung in the air between us, its implications rippling outward. If Drew was suggesting that Vanessa had been unfaithful or dishonest about the paternity of her child, it represented a new low even for him, throwing her under the bus in an attempt to salvage his position with me. Whether the baby is yours or not is between you and Vanessa, I said coolly. It doesn't change what you did, or the lies you told. It doesn't erase the offshore accounts or the plans you made. To leave me with nothing. Drew's expression hardened. Fine. Have it your way. But don't think this is over. The company is mine, Jennifer. I built it from nothing, and I'm not going to let you take it from me because of one mistake. One mistake? I repeated incredulously. Is that what you call systematic deception? Financial fraud? Bringing your pregnant girlfriend to our anniversary dinner to publicly humiliate me? I shook my head. Your problem, Drew, has always been that you refuse to take responsibility for your actions. Everything is someone else's fault, someone else's misunderstanding, someone else's overreaction. He straightened, his momentary vulnerability replaced by the cold calculation I'd come to recognize as his true nature. You want a war? Fine, you'll get one. And when it's over, you'll wish you'd taken the settlement offer. With that, he turned and walked away, back straight, head high, the posture of a man who still believed he could control the narrative, manipulate the outcome, bend reality to his will. I watched him go, feeling not anger or fear, but a profound weariness and an equally profound certainty that I was finally seeing Drew Mitchell clearly for the first time in our relationship. Sam approached as Drew disappeared around a corner. Everything okay? Not really, I admitted, but it will be. We made our way out of the courthouse, stepping into the bright afternoon sunlight. Mel was waiting by her car, keys in hand. Lunch? She suggested. I think we all could use a drink after that performance. I nodded, grateful for her steady presence. Definitely, though I'm not sure I have much of an appetite. Trust me, Mel said, unlocking the doors. You need to eat. Divorce court is a marathon, not a sprint. You need to keep your strength up. As we drove away from the courthouse, I found myself thinking about Drew's question. What did I really want? Beyond the legal battle, beyond the division of assets, beyond the vindication of having my contributions recognized, what was I seeking? The answer came to me as we turned onto the main boulevard. The city spread out before us in the midday. Sun. Freedom. Freedom from the constant second-guessing, from the subtle undermining of my confidence, from the careful management of Drew's moods and expectations. Freedom to build a life centered on my own desires and ambitions rather than subordinated to someone else's. It was a startling realization, not because it was novel, but because it highlighted how constrained I had been even before discovering Drew's infidelity. Our marriage had been like a beautiful cage, gilded with success and social approval, but a cage nonetheless. Earth to Jennifer. Mel's voice broke through my thoughts. Where should we go for lunch? Sam suggested that new bistro on Elm, but I'm thinking something stronger than wine might be in order. I smiled, pulled back to the present moment. The bistro sounds perfect. And Mel? Thank you. For everything. What are friends for? She replied with a grin. Besides, someone needs to document this epic takedown for posterity. Sam laughed from the back seat. I'm not sure the Bar Association would approve of that characterization of divorce proceedings. Then the Bar Association needs to lighten up, Mel declared, turning into the restaurant parking lot. When someone tries to screw over my best friend and gets exactly what they deserve instead, I reserve the right to celebrate appropriately. As we entered the restaurant, the hostess led us to a quiet table by the window. The bistro was elegant but unpretentious, with soft lighting and comfortable seating, exactly the kind of place where three friends could decompress after a stressful morning. We ordered drinks and appetizers, the conversation initially revolving around the details of the hearing, Judge Ramirez's demeanor, and Drew's increasingly transparent attempts to manipulate the court. When he tried to explain those offshore accounts, Sam chuckled, shaking his head, I thought the judge was going to hold him in contempt right there. Exploring Caribbean opportunities, please. Mel raised her glass in a toast. To Judge Ramirez, who wasn't born yesterday and doesn't suffer fools gladly. We clinked glasses, the tension of the morning finally beginning to dissipate. As we moved on to our main courses, the conversation shifted from the legal proceedings to more personal matters. So, Mel asked, spearing a forkful of salad, what happens next? With the house, I mean. Are you staying there? I considered the question. The Victorian in the historic district had been our home for nearly a decade. I'd poured my heart into its renovation, choosing every paint color, every piece of furniture, every fixture with care. But now it felt haunted by memories, tainted by Drew's deception. I don't think so, I said slowly. Too many ghosts. I think I need a fresh start, somewhere that's just mine. Sam nodded encouragingly. That's not uncommon in these situations. Many clients find that physical separation from marital property helps with emotional closure. Plus, Mel added with a grin, you get to decorate from scratch, which I know. You love. I smiled, appreciating her attempt to find the silver lining. True, though I'll need to find temporary housing first while all this is being sorted out. Stay with me, Mel offered immediately. I have that guest suite that's just gathering dust. You can have all the privacy you need, and I promise not to mother hen you too much. The offer was tempting. Mel's condo was spacious and centrally located, and having a friend nearby during the tumultuous weeks ahead would be comforting. But some instinct told me that complete independence, however challenging, was what I needed now. Thank you, I said, genuine gratitude in my voice. But I think I need to do this on my own. Maybe a short-term rental downtown, near the office. Mel nodded, understanding without offense. Just know the offer stands if you change your mind, no matter what time of day or night. As we finished our meal, my phone buzzed with a text. I expected it to be Drew, with more threats or attempts at manipulation. Instead, it was Vanessa. Can we meet? I have information about the offshore accounts that might help your case. I stared at the message, surprised and vaguely suspicious. Was this a trap orchestrated by Drew, an attempt to gather information or evidence against me? Or had Vanessa truly decided to align herself against him? I showed the text to Sam, who read it with professional caution. Could be legitimate, could be a setup. If you want to meet her, I should be there. I nodded, considering the possibilities. I'll suggest a public place tomorrow afternoon. Let's see what she has to offer. As I texted back a response, I thought about the strange new reality I was navigating, one where my husband's pregnant girlfriend might become an ally in the battle over the company we'd built together. Life had a way of creating the most unexpected alliances, of reshaping relationships in ways that defied simple categorization. Whatever happened next, I knew that the path forward would be neither straight nor smooth. There would be more legal battles, more emotional confrontations, more difficult decisions about what to keep and what to leave behind. But for the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt fully present in my own life, not just reacting to Drew's actions or accommodating his ambitions, but actively shaping my own future. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. This newfound freedom, this reclamation of self. As we paid the bill and stepped back into the sunlight, I felt something unfamiliar unfurling within me. Hope, not for reconciliation or restoration of what was lost, but for the possibility of something entirely new, something that would be wholly, authentically mine. 6 months after that fateful anniversary dinner, I stood in the empty living room of my new apartment, watching the movers carry in the last of my carefully labeled boxes. The space was modern and bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Oak Ridge's riverfront district. Nothing like the Victorian Drew and I had shared, with its ornate moldings and historical charm. This place was sleek, minimalist, utterly my own. "Where do you want the drafting table, Ms. Mitchell?" one of the movers asked, gesturing to the oversized wooden surface that had been my companion through countless design projects. "The room with the northern exposure, please," I replied. "And it's just Jennifer now." The decision to drop the Mitchell surname had been practical as much as symbolic. With the divorce finalized 2 weeks prior, I was reclaiming my identity piece by piece, starting with my maiden name, Jennifer Clark, which now adorned the door of my design studio and the business cards I'd had reprinted. My phone chimed, with a text from Mel. "Champagne and takeout at 7 to celebrate the new digs?" I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. Mel had been my rock throughout the turbulent months of legal proceedings, emergency hearings, and emotional upheaval. She deserved to be the first to toast this fresh beginning. As the movers finished their work and departed, I wandered through the apartment, mentally arranging furniture and planning color schemes. The blank canvas of these walls represented more than just a new home. It was the physical manifestation of the freedom I'd fought so hard to secure. The meeting with Vanessa had proved pivotal in that fight. We'd met at a quiet cafe downtown, Sam accompanying me as a precaution. She'd arrived looking noticeably more pregnant than the last time I'd seen her, her face drawn with fatigue and stress. "Thank you for meeting me," she'd said, sliding into the booth across from us. I wasn't. "Sure you would. You said you had information about the offshore accounts," I'd replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I'm listening." Vanessa had placed a USB drive on the table between us. "Everything's here. Account numbers, passwords, transfer records. Drew gave me access when he thought we were planning a future together." Her bitter laugh had held no humor. "He said it was so I could access the money if anything happened to him." Sam had picked up the drive, studying it carefully. "Why are you giving us this?" Vanessa had met my gaze directly. "Because he lied to me, just like he lied to you. The baby is his. I've never been with anyone else since we started seeing each other. But when I refused to terminate the pregnancy, suddenly he wasn't so sure. Suddenly he needed paternity tests. Suddenly I was trapping him." She'd wrapped her hands protectively around her swollen belly. "I don't want anything from him anymore. Not support, not acknowledgement, nothing. I just want him to face consequences for once in his privileged life." The information on that USB drive had been damning. Detailed records of millions siphoned not just from Mitchell Construction, but from our personal accounts as well. Funds moved through a labyrinth of shell companies before landing in numbered accounts in tax havens around the world. The kind of financial engineering that required professional assistance. When presented with this evidence, Drew's attorney had immediately pushed for settlement negotiations. The legal battle that Drew had promised would destroy me ended not with the dramatic courtroom showdown he'd threatened, but with a mediation room and signatures on carefully worded agreements. In the end, I received 51% ownership of Mitchell Construction, the company renamed to Clark Designs and Development to reflect both my maiden name and the shift in leadership. Drew retained a minority stake but no operational control, a compromise I'd accepted to avoid further legal costs and prolonged conflict. The offshore funds were repatriated and divided according to the settlement terms, with penalties and interest paid to the relevant tax authorities. The house had been sold, the proceeds split between us after the mortgage was satisfied. Drew had moved to Chicago, accepting a position with a development firm there. A fresh start in a city where his reputation hadn't been tarnished by public scandal and legal proceedings. My phone rang, pulling me back to the present. Sam's name flashed on the screen. Jennifer, he greeted me warmly when I answered. How's the move going? Just finished, I replied, sinking onto a packing crate. It's starting to feel real now. That's why I'm calling, actually. The last of the paperwork came through this morning. The company name change is official, and the board restructuring is complete. He paused. Congratulations, Ms. Clark. You are now officially the majority owner and CEO of Clark Designs and Development. A wave of emotion washed over me. Pride, vindication, relief, and an unexpected pang of something like grief. The company had been our shared dream once, the manifestation of ambitions we'd built together. Now it was mine alone, transformed into something new. Thank you, Sam, for everything. The words felt inadequate for the months of guidance and support he'd provided. Just doing my job, he replied modestly. Though I must admit, this case was particularly satisfying. Not often we get to see justice served so definitively. After ending the call, I wandered to the windows, gazing out at the river flowing. Past, constant and ever-changing. My reflection stared back at me from the glass. A woman transformed not just by external circumstances, but by the internal journey of the past year. The doorbell rang, announcing Mel's arrival hours earlier than expected. But when I opened the door, it wasn't Mel who stood in the hallway. Vanessa Collins balanced a small gift bag in one hand, her other arm supporting her back, her pregnancy now in its final weeks. Hi, she said tentatively. I hope it's okay that I stopped by. Kevin from the office gave me your new address. I hesitated only briefly before stepping back to let her in. Of course. Come in. She waddled into the apartment, glancing around, at the boxes and sparse furniture. I would have waited until you were settled, but... She gestured to her enormous belly. Time's kind of running out for social calls. I smiled despite myself. When are you due? 2 weeks, officially, but the doctor thinks it might be sooner. She handed me the gift bag. This is for you, a housewarming present, I guess. Inside was a small ceramic planter shaped like a house with tiny windows and a door, filled with a thriving succulent. The card read simply, For new beginnings, V. It's lovely, I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Thank you. Vanessa settled awkwardly onto the only chair I'd unpacked, relief washing over her face as she took the weight off her feet. I'm not staying long. I just wanted to thank you in person. Thank me? I asked, confused. For what? For not hating me, she said simply. You could have. You had every right to. Instead, you treated me with dignity, even when I didn't deserve it. I set the planter on the windowsill, considering her words. Hating you would have been easy, but ultimately, pointless. You were as much a victim of Drew's manipulation as I was, just in different ways. She nodded, absent-mindedly rubbing her belly as the baby shifted visibly beneath her shirt. When I found out I was pregnant, Drew was so excited. Talked about us being a family, about the future we'd build together. It wasn't until after that dinner at the Royal Oak that everything changed. She looked up, her expression pained. Suddenly, the pregnancy was an inconvenience, a trap I'd set for him. He accused me of getting pregnant on purpose to secure my financial future. That sounds like Drew, I said, the familiar pattern all too recognizable. Rewriting reality to cast himself as the victim. The paternity test came back last week, Vanessa continued. Not that I had any doubts, but Drew insisted. It's definitely his. She gave a small, humorless laugh. Not that it matters to him. He signed away his parental rights as part of some deal with his new employers in Chicago. A clean break, he called it. The callousness of it, abandoning his own child for the sake of career convenience, was shocking even by Drew's standards. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "That must be incredibly difficult." Vanessa shrugged, a gesture of forced nonchalance that didn't quite mask her pain. "It's better this way. No more lies, no more manipulation. My son will grow up without a father, but at least he won't grow up with Drew Mitchell's particular brand of fatherhood." "You're having a boy?" I asked. Her face softened, maternal pride momentarily eclipsing her bitterness. "Yes, Noah Daniel Collins. Just mine, no one else's." We talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing more easily than I would have expected. Vanessa spoke of her plans to return to school after the baby was born, to finish the business degree she'd abandoned when her previous relationship had ended badly. I found myself offering resources, suggestions, even mentioning the daycare center near my office that offered scholarships for single parents. "I should go," she said finally, struggling to her feet. "Let you get back to unpacking." I walked her to the door, struck by the strange symmetry of our situations, both of us starting over, rebuilding lives that Drew Mitchell had attempted to define and control. "If you ever need anything," I said, surprising myself with the sincerity of the offer, "don't hesitate to reach out." Vanessa smiled, genuine warmth in her expression. "Same to you. Although I doubt a sleep-deprived single mom with a newborn will have much to offer." "You never know," I replied. "Life has a way of surprising us." After she left, I returned to the window, studying the small ceramic house with its tiny succulent resident. For new beginnings. It was an apt sentiment, not just for my new living space, but for the entire trajectory of my life post-Drew. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of unpacking and organizing. By the time Mel arrived with promised champagne and Thai food, I'd made significant progress in transforming the sterile apartment into something that felt like mine. "Look at you," Mel declared, surveying my work. "Not even a full day and you've already got this place looking like something out of a design magazine." I laughed, accepting the chilled bottle she extended. "Hardly, but it's getting there." We settled on the floor, using packing crates as makeshift tables, the food spread between us in its fragrant containers. Mel raised her plastic cup of champagne in a toast. "To Jennifer Clark," she said, pride evident in her voice. "CEO, design visionary, and the woman who took Drew Mitchell to the cleaners." I clinked my cup against hers, smiling. "To new beginnings." As we ate, I told Mel about Vanessa's unexpected visit. Her eyebrows rose progressively higher as I described our surprisingly cordial conversation. "So let me get this straight," she said when I finished. "The pregnant mistress who showed up at your anniversary dinner brought you a housewarming gift and you two are now, what? Friends?" I considered the question. "Not friends exactly, but not enemies either. We have a shared experience that few others could understand." Mel shook her head, impressed. "Your capacity for forgiveness continues to astound me. If it were me, I'd have told her where to stick that succulent." "No, you wouldn't have," I countered, knowing my friend's bark was far worse than her bite. "You'd have been kind, just like you've always been to me." "Maybe," she conceded, reaching for more pad thai. But only after making her squirm a little. We laughed, the sound echoing in the half-furnished space. It felt good, normal even, after months of stress and legal maneuvering. A reminder that life continued beyond divorce, beyond betrayal, beyond all the markers I'd once used to define myself. Later, after Mel had gone home and I'd made up my bed amid still-packed boxes, I sat on the balcony with a final glass of champagne, watching the city lights reflect on the river below. The night was clear, stars visible despite the urban glow, the air crisp with the promise of fall. My phone chimed with an email notification. A message from Kevin, Drew's former business partner, and now my colleague at Clark Designs and Development. "Thought you'd want to see this," the subject line read. I opened the attachment to find a photograph of the newly installed sign outside our headquarters, the elegant logo I'd designed years ago now paired with the company's new name. Clark Designs and Development. Below the image, Kevin had written, "Staff reaction overwhelmingly positive. 3 new clients signed this week. The future looks bright, boss." Boss. The word felt strange, empowering, and slightly terrifying all at once. Despite my years of contribution to Mitchell Construction, I'd always operated in Drew's shadow, my role minimized and marginalized by his dominating presence. Now I stood at the helm of a thriving company, responsible for the livelihoods of nearly 100 employees and the success of dozens of ongoing projects. The weight of that responsibility was substantial, but not crushing. If anything, it felt like finally shouldering a load I'd been prepared to carry all along, one that Drew had actively prevented me from taking up. I typed back a quick reply to Kevin, thanking him for the update and promising to be in the office early Monday to review the new client contracts. Then, on impulse, I opened my camera and took a selfie with the city lights behind me, glass raised in a silent toast. I sent it to Mel with the caption, "To the view from the other side." Her response came seconds later. "It's only getting better from here." I hoped she was right. The legal battles were behind me, the divorce finalized, the company rebranded and restructured. But the emotional landscape was still shifting, still settling into its new configuration. There were moments when I missed the certainty of my married life, the clear role and identity I'd inhabited for 15 years. Moments when I questioned whether I'd made the right choices, taken the right paths through the wreckage of my marriage. But those moments were growing fewer and farther between, eclipsed by longer stretches of genuine contentment and even excitement about the future unfolding before me. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through windows. I had yet to hang curtains on. I woke early, energized despite the previous day's moving exertions. After a quick shower, I dressed in comfortable clothes and decided to explore my new neighborhood properly. The riverfront district had transformed, in recent years from industrial warehouses to trendy residential and commercial spaces. My building, a converted textile mill, stood at the heart of the Renaissance, surrounded by cafes, boutiques, and public green spaces that bordered the river. I found a coffee shop 2 blocks away, its wide windows and brick walls creating a warmth that immediately appealed to me. The barista, a young woman with a sleeve of colorful tattoos, greeted me with a friendly smile. "New to the neighborhood?" she asked as she prepared my latte. "Is it that obvious?" I laughed. "We know all the regulars," she explained, creating an intricate leaf pattern in the foam. "And you have that just moved in look about you. Curious, but not quite settled." "Good eye," I said, accepting the steaming mug with appreciation. "I moved in yesterday, just a few blocks away." "Well, welcome to the riverfront. I'm Maya, by the way." "Jennifer," I replied, dropping my last name, instinctively. It felt liberating, introducing myself without the weight of the Mitchell surname attached. "Nice to meet you, Jennifer. First cups on the house, neighborhood tradition for new residents." The small kindness from a stranger brought an unexpected lump to my throat. "Thank you. That's very welcoming." I took my free coffee to a table by the window, watching the Saturday morning rhythm of the neighborhood unfold. Joggers along the riverfront path, couples walking dogs, parents with strollers heading toward the playground a few blocks down. Normal life, everyday moments that had nothing to do with lawsuits or betrayal or the dramatic implosion of a marriage. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard Mitchell, Drew's father. Our contact had been limited since the divorce, not out of animosity, but from a mutual understanding of the awkwardness of our position. I opened the message with curiosity. Jennifer, Margaret, and I are in town for the weekend. We'd love to see you if you're available for lunch or coffee. No pressure. Of course. The invitation was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Despite everything that had happened with Drew, I'd always valued my relationship with his parents. Their support during the divorce proceedings had meant more than they probably realized. I typed back. Just moved into a new place in the Riverfront district. There's a lovely cafe 2 blocks away if you'd like to meet there around noon. Richard's response came quickly. Perfect. See you then. I finished my coffee, a mix of anticipation and nervousness settling in my stomach. Would seeing Drew's parents reopen wounds that had only just begun to heal? Or would it provide a different kind of closure, a reaffirmation that not all connections needed to be severed when a marriage ended? With time to spare before our meeting, I continued my exploration of the neighborhood, discovering a small bookstore tucked between a yoga studio and a farm-to-table restaurant. The owner, an elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, greeted me warmly as I browsed the carefully curated shelves. "Looking for anything in particular?" he asked, noting my attention to the design and architecture section. "Just getting to know the place," I replied, picking up a coffee table book on urban renewal projects. "I'm new to the neighborhood." Welcome then. I'm Harold. Been here since before it was fashionable, nearly 40 years now." He gestured to the sleek apartments visible through the window. "Used to be nothing but warehouses and factories around here. Quite the transformation." "You must have seen a lot of changes," I said, genuinely interested. "Change is the only constant," Harold replied with the wisdom of his years. "Those who resist it get left behind. Those who embrace it thrive." He tapped the book in my hands. "That's a good one, by the way. The author has a keen eye for how spaces can be reinvented without losing their soul." The comment resonated with me. On a personal level, wasn't that exactly what I was attempting with my own life? A reinvention that preserved the essential core while discarding what no longer served? I purchased the book, promising Harold I'd return once I'd finished it to discuss my thoughts. By noon, I was seated at an outdoor table at the cafe, watching for Richard and Margaret's arrival. They appeared right on time, Richard's tall frame and silver hair visible from a distance, Margaret's petite figure at his side. They spotted me and waved, navigating between tables to reach me. "Jennifer," Margaret embraced me warmly, her familiar perfume bringing a rush of memories. "You look wonderful, positively glowing." "It's good to see you both," I said, meaning it despite the slight awkwardness. "Thank you for reaching out." Richard took the seat across from me, his kind eyes studying my face. "We've missed you. It didn't seem right to lose touch just because—" He trailed off, not needing to complete the thought. "How have you been?" Margaret asked after we'd ordered. Really, not the polite answer. I considered the question, appreciating her directness. "It's been a journey," I admitted. "Some days are easier than others. But overall, I'm good. Building something new." "We've seen the company rebranding," Richard nodded. "Impressive work. The design community is taking notice." "Thank you. It's been challenging but rewarding. How about you two? How are you doing? With everything?" Margaret exchanged a glance with Richard before responding. "It's been difficult, I won't lie. Drew is still our son despite his mistakes. But he's made choices that we can't support or condone." "He's in Chicago now," Richard added, though I already knew this. "Started a new position with Meridian Development. Says he's doing well, but—" He shrugged, the gesture conveying his skepticism about Drew's self-reporting. "And we hear from Vanessa occasionally," Margaret continued. "Such a shame about the baby. Drew refusing to acknowledge his own child." She shook her head, genuine sadness in her expression. "We've offered support, but she's very independent. Proud. Yes, she is, I agreed, thinking of Vanessa's visit the previous day. She stopped by my new place yesterday, actually. She's due any day now. Margaret's eyes widened with surprise. You two are in touch? Not regularly, I clarified, but we've made peace with the situation. She was as much a victim of Drew's manipulation as I was. Richard reached across the table to squeeze my hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. You always did have the biggest heart, Jennifer. That's one of the many things we've always loved about you. The lunch continued, our conversation drifting from personal updates to safer topics. Richard's recent retirement, Margaret's volunteer work with a literacy program, the renovation of their lake house. The initial awkwardness faded, replaced by the comfortable familiarity of people who had been family for 15 years. As we prepared to part ways, Margaret hesitated, clearly wanting to say something more. Jennifer, we know it's presumptuous to ask, but when Vanessa's baby arrives, would it be possible for you to let us know? We'd like to send something to acknowledge our grandchild, even if Drew won't. The request caught me off guard, but I nodded. Of course, I'm sure Vanessa would appreciate that. Thank you. Margaret's relief was palpable, and please know that whatever happens, you'll always be family to us. Richard nodded in agreement. Some bonds transcend legal documents. I hugged them both goodbye, watching as they walked. Hand in hand down the riverfront path, their shoulders leaning slightly toward each other in the comfortable posture of a long and loving marriage. The sight brought not jealousy or regret, but a genuine happiness that such partnerships existed, even if mine hadn't been among them. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of unpacking and settling in. By Sunday evening, my new apartment had taken shape, furniture arranged, artwork hung, books shelved. It felt like home, or the beginning of one. A space unmarked by memories of Drew, untainted by the breakdown of our marriage, a clean slate upon which to write the next chapter of my life. Monday morning arrived with the familiar mix of anticipation and nerves that accompanies any significant transition. I dressed carefully for my first day as the official CEO of Clark Designs and Development, choosing a tailored navy suit that projected confidence and authority without sacrificing style. The company headquarters, a renovated commercial building in downtown Oak Ridge, had been Mitchell Construction's home for the past 7 years. Walking through the lobby, I noted the empty space where the old company sign had hung, now awaiting the installation of the interior version of our new branding. Kevin met me at the elevator, tablet in hand and coffee extended as an offering. Morning, boss. Ready for the troops? I accepted the coffee gratefully. As ready as I'll ever be. How's the mood? Curious but positive, he reported as we stepped into the elevator. The design team is thrilled. Obviously, they've always been your people. The project managers are cautiously optimistic. The only real resistance is coming from the old guard in business development. Drew's golf buddies, I nodded, naming the small faction of executives who had been hired more for their connections than their competence. Not unexpected. They'll come around or they'll move on, Kevin said, with the pragmatism that made him such a valuable partner. Either way, the company will be stronger for it. The executive floor was buzzing with activity when we arrived, staff members casting curious glances our way as we made our way to the conference room where the leadership team was gathered for the morning meeting. 15 faces turned toward me as I entered, some eager, some apprehensive, all attentive. Good morning, I began, taking my place at the head of the table. I want to thank you all for your patience during this transition period. The past 6 months have been challenging for everyone, and I appreciate the professionalism you've shown throughout the process. I paused, looking around the table, making eye contact with each person present. Clark Designs and Development represents not just a name change, but an evolution in how we approach our work. We're going to build on the foundation that's been laid, preserving what works well while implementing changes where needed. For the next hour, I outlined my vision for the company's future: more integrated design-build approaches, greater emphasis on sustainable practices, expansion into markets we'd previously neglected. The team listened attentively, some taking notes, others nodding in agreement. Even the skeptics seemed engaged, if not fully convinced. "Questions?" I asked, concluding my presentation. There were many, ranging from practical concerns about ongoing projects to more philosophical questions about the company's direction. I answered each one directly, acknowledging when I didn't have immediate solutions and promising to work collaboratively to find them. As the meeting dispersed, Kevin lingered behind, a satisfied expression on his face. "That went better than I expected," he admitted. "You've won over at least 2 of the fence-sitters." "It's a start," I agreed. "Change takes time." The rest of the day was a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and email exchanges. By late afternoon, I was ensconced in what had been Drew's office, now mine, reviewing project proposals and budget forecasts. The space felt different somehow, not just because I'd had the furniture rearranged and Drew's golf trophies removed, but because the energy had shifted from his aggressive, often chaotic management style to something more focused and intentional. A knock at the door interrupted my concentration. My assistant, Tara, poked her head in. "Sorry to disturb you, but there's a call on line 2 that you might want to take. It's Vanessa Collins, and she sounds urgent." I picked up the phone immediately. "Vanessa? Is everything okay?" Her voice came through breathless and strained. "I think I'm in labor. My water just broke and the contractions are coming pretty fast. The doctor says to get to the hospital now." "Where are you?" I asked, already rising from my desk. "At home, but I called an Uber. It should be here any minute." "Cancel it," I said firmly. "I'm leaving the office now. I can be at your place in 15 minutes. There was a pause, then a relieved sigh. "Thank you. I don't want to be alone for this." I grabbed my purse and keys, instructing Tara to reschedule my remaining appointments. "Family emergency," I explained briefly, not stopping to analyze why I'd categorized Vanessa's situation that way. The drive to her apartment was tense, traffic seeming to conspire against my urgency. When I finally arrived, I found Vanessa sitting on the edge of her sofa, face contorted in pain as another contraction seized her. "Perfect timing," she gasped as the contraction eased. "They're about 7 minutes apart now." I helped her to my car, her hastily packed hospital bag slung over my shoulder. As we navigated toward Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital, Vanessa gripped the door handle, her breathing labored. "Thank you for coming," she said between contractions. "My sister's flight doesn't get in until tomorrow, and my mom's in Phoenix with her new husband." "Of course," I replied, focused on the road but acutely aware of the surreal nature of our situation. No one should have to do this alone. The hospital admitted Vanessa immediately, the labor progressing faster than typical for a first-time mother. I found myself in the unfamiliar role of birth coach, holding her hand through contractions, advocating with nurses, fetching ice chips and cool cloths for her forehead. "Did you call Drew?" she asked during a brief respite between the increasingly intense contractions. I shook my head. "Do you want me to?" She considered the question, then grimaced as another wave of pain began building. "No," she decided, her voice strained. "He gave up the right to be here. I don't need his negativity today." The labor intensified rapidly after that, Vanessa progressing from 7 to 10 centimeters in less than 2 hours. The delivery room became a flurry of activity as nurses and the attending obstetrician prepared for the imminent birth. "I can't do this," Vanessa moaned as the urge to push became overwhelming. "It hurts too much." "You can," I insisted, surprising myself with the fierce conviction in my voice. "You're stronger than you know. You've already survived so much worse than this." She met my gaze, something resolute crystallizing in her expression despite the pain. Then she bore down, channeling her fear and agony into the primal work of bringing her child into the world. Noah Daniel Collins arrived at 7:42 p.m., his lusty cries filling the delivery room as the doctor placed him on Vanessa's chest. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfect newborn, with a shock of dark hair and his mother's determined chin. "Hello, little one," Vanessa whispered, tears streaming down her face as she cradled her son. "I've been waiting for you." I stepped back, giving mother and child their first moments together, feeling like both an intruder and a witness to something profound. As the medical team attended to the final details of the delivery, I slipped out to the hallway, overwhelmed by the emotions of the past few hours. Leaning against the wall, I pulled out my phone and texted Margaret Mitchell. "Noah Daniel Collins arrived at 7:42 p.m. 7 lbs 4 ozao, mother and baby doing well." Her response came almost immediately. "Thank you, Jennifer. Please give Vanessa our love and congratulations. We'll respect her wishes regarding contact, but our hearts are with them both." When I returned to the room, Vanessa had been moved to a recovery bed, Noah swaddled and sleeping peacefully in her arms. She looked up as I entered, exhaustion and joy commingling in her expression. "He's perfect," I said, approaching the bed to get a better look at the sleeping infant. "Would you like to hold him?" Vanessa offered, already shifting to pass the bundle to me. I hesitated only briefly before accepting, cradling Noah with the careful attention his newness demanded. He stirred slightly, dark lashes fluttering against his cheeks before settling back into sleep. Looking down at this tiny human, Drew's son, though he'd denied him, I felt not the jealousy or resentment I might have expected, but a strange sense of connection and responsibility. Not as a mother figure or even a family member, but as someone who understood the circumstances of his entry into the world and was committed, in some undefined way, to seeing him thrive despite them. "I told Margaret and Richard," I said quietly, returning Noah to Vanessa's waiting arms. "Hope that's okay?" They asked to be notified when he arrived. Vanessa nodded, adjusting the blanket around her son. "It's fine. They should know their grandson, even if Drew doesn't want to." We sat in companionable silence for a while, the room quiet except for the soft sounds of Noah's breathing and the distant bustle of the hospital corridor. Finally, Vanessa spoke, her voice thoughtful. "It's strange, isn't it? A year ago, neither of us knew the other existed. Now, here we are, connected by this tiny person and the man who tried to destroy both of us." "Life takes unexpected turns," I agreed, thinking of all the changes the past year had brought. "But sometimes those turns lead us exactly where we need to be." Vanessa studied my face, her expression serious. "I used to envy you, you know. When Drew would talk about you, which wasn't often, he made you sound so perfect. The successful wife, the supportive partner, the woman who had it all together." She shook her head ruefully. "I wanted to be you. Isn't that ridiculous? I was sleeping with your husband and envying your life." "Not ridiculous," I said gently. "Just misguided. The life Drew described wasn't real. It was the carefully curated version he wanted the world to see. And now?" Vanessa glanced down at Noah, then back to me. "Is this real? This strange friendship or alliance or whatever it is between us?" I considered the question, searching for the most honest answer. "I think it is. Not conventional, certainly. But genuine in its own way." She nodded, satisfied with the response. "Good, because Noah's going to need all the authentic relationships he can get." A nurse entered then, checking Vanessa's vitals and offering to take Noah to the nursery. For a few hours, so the new mother could rest. After some hesitation, Vanessa agreed, watching with anxious eyes as her son was wheeled away. "You should go home," she told me once we were alone again. "You've done more than enough, and you must be exhausted." "Are you sure? I don't mind staying until your sister arrives tomorrow." "I'm sure. she assured me. The nurses will help with anything I need, and honestly, I could use a few hours of sleep before this little guy demands my full attention again. I gathered my things, promising to check in the next day. At the door, I paused, turning back to the woman who had once been my nemesis and now occupied some indefinable space in my life. Not quite friend, not quite family, but important nonetheless. Vanessa, you're going to be an amazing mother. She smiled, exhaustion temporarily eclipsed by the simple joy of the compliment. Thank you. And Jennifer? You're going to be an amazing CEO. The echo of my earlier words to her, "You're stronger than you know," resonated as I made my way through the quiet hospital corridors to the parking garage. Both of us were embarking on new chapters, facing challenges we hadn't anticipated, building lives that bore little resemblance to what we'd once imagined. The night air was cool as I emerged from the hospital, stars visible in the clear sky above. I paused in the parking lot, taking a deep breath and looking up at the constellations, unchanging patterns in an ever-changing world. 1 year ago, I had been Jennifer Mitchell, wife and shadow contributor to my husband's success. Now I stood as Jennifer Clark, CEO of my own company, architect of my own destiny. The journey had been painful, filled with betrayal and legal battles, but also with unexpected allies and moments of profound growth. As I drove home to my new apartment, I thought about the strange tapestry life had woven, connecting me to Vanessa and now to Noah, creating unlikely bonds from broken promises. Drew had meant his actions to diminish me, to reduce me to a footnote in his narrative. Instead, they had catalyzed my transformation into something stronger, more authentic, more completely myself than I had ever been in our 15 years together. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't in the courtroom victories or the company ownership. It was in reclaiming my power, my identity, my future. It was in living well, on my own terms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.